Roy Orbison was one of the legends of rock and roll, the generation of Elvis Presley and Jerry Lee Lewis. They called him the Big O. He didn't have a stage act, just a voice.
In the world of rock and roll, few voices ever cut as deeply or as mysteriously as Roy Orbison's. Behind the signature dark sunglasses and black suits was a man whose music held an almost ghostly ache. For decades, fans and critics alike puzzled over the contradiction. How could a man so emotionally still on stage channel such devastation in his songs? The answer was long buried beneath fame and myth. But now, the Roy Orbison mystery has finally been solved, and it isn't good. By age 6, he was already strumming a guitar given by his father, and by 8, he was performing regularly on KERB, a local radio station in Fort Worth. But as Orbison moved to Wink, Texas, and formed his first band, the Wink Westerners, in high school, it became clear that the boy with the shy demeanor and thick glasses wasn't just chasing a dream, he was building an escape. And today, we'll unveil everything. Breakthrough and musical evolution. Roy Orbison's professional journey began in earnest when he signed with Sun Records in Memphis, Tennessee in 1956. At the time, Sun was home to several influential artists, including Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, and Jerry Lee Lewis. And Orbison's early recordings reflected the rockabilly style that the label had popularized. Songs like Ooby Dooby gained some regional airplay and modest national success, peaking at number 59 on the Billboard Hot 100. But Orbison's distinctive voice and musical instincts didn't quite fit the label's high-energy rockabilly mold. By the end of the 1950s, Orbison grew disillusioned with Sun Records and the limitations of the rockabilly genre. He briefly worked as a songwriter for Acuff Rose Music in Nashville, penning songs for other artists, including Claudette, which became a hit for the Everly Brothers. This period helped him sharpen his lyrical skills and reimagine his artistic direction. The turning point in his career came in 1959, when he signed with Monument Records, an independent label founded by Fred Foster. And the rest is history. In 1960, Roy Orbison released Only the Lonely, a song he co-wrote with Joe Melson after it had been rejected by both Elvis Presley and the Everly Brothers. Orbison's haunting vocals and the song's orchestral backing set it apart from the upbeat rock standards of the era. Only the Lonely reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and climbed to number 1 on the UK singles chart, establishing Orbison as a force in both American and international markets. Over the next 4 years, Orbison delivered an astonishing string of hits. In 1961 alone, he released Running Scared, which ended with a soaring, unaccompanied crescendo that broke conventional song structure and demonstrated his ability to convey catharsis through melody. That same year, Crying became another landmark. The song reached number 2 in the US and later earned Orbison a Grammy Hall of Fame award in 2002.
For Best Pop Vocal Performance, Male, and the Grammy goes to Roy Orbison.
In Dreams, released in 1963, was structured unconventionally with no repeating chorus and a series of dramatic key changes. Another example of how Orbison defied the traditional pop formula. His hit, It's Over, topped the UK charts and continued his streak of chart dominance. Perhaps the most iconic of his early hits was Oh Pretty Woman, released in August 1964. Co-written with his longtime collaborator Bill Dees, the song combined a memorable guitar riff with a confident vocal performance that retained the emotional nuance of his earlier ballads. Oh Pretty Woman became Orbison's biggest commercial success, reaching number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and staying there for 3 weeks. It also hit number 1 in the UK and sold over 7 million copies worldwide. The track's opening riff, performed by guitarists Billy Sanford and Jerry Kennedy, would go on to influence generations of rock musicians, and its popularity endured, even lending its name to the 1990 romantic comedy Pretty Woman, starring Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. What made Orbison stand out during this era wasn't just the commercial success of his singles, but the entirely unique vocal approach he brought to popular music. His operatic 3-octave vocal range allowed him to move effortlessly from quiet, trembling introspection to powerful, full-throated climaxes within a single song. His voice was often compared to classical tenors, earning him nicknames such as the Caruso of rock, in reference to famed Italian opera singer Enrico Caruso, and the Big O, a nod to his commanding presence despite his reserved personality. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Orbison did not rely on showmanship or overt charisma on stage. His performance style was notably static. He rarely moved or danced and often stood completely still during concerts. He adopted a signature look that included black clothing, a stoic expression, and dark sunglasses, which he initially wore due to poor eyesight and later embraced as part of his mystique. His image contrasted sharply with the vibrant optimism of the early 1960s rock scene, where stars like the Beatles and the Beach Boys projected youthful exuberance. Orbison's songs spoke instead to alienation, heartbreak, and longing, resonating with listeners who felt outside the mainstream of romantic triumph and teenage cheer. Thematically, Orbison's catalog was also distinct. While most rock and roll of the time focused on teenage love, rebellion, and escapism, Orbison's music was saturated with loss, yearning, and melancholy. Songs like Crying and It's Over explored the emotional wreckage left behind by failed relationships, while In Dreams conveyed the surreal torment of loving someone unreachable. Even his more upbeat tracks carried an undercurrent of vulnerability. This emotional honesty was part of what made his music so relatable, especially during a period of cultural transition marked by the civil rights movement, the Cold War, and the beginning of societal questioning in the West. Between 1960 and 1965, Orbison scored 22 singles on the Billboard Top 40, including 10 top 10 hits and 2 that reached #1. His international success was equally impressive. He toured extensively across the UK and Europe, famously sharing billing with the Beatles on their 1963 UK tour. Even as the British invasion reshaped the landscape of rock, Orbison's unique style allowed him to remain relevant and respected among a new generation of musicians. By the mid-1960s, however, musical trends began to shift, and Orbison's popularity in the US started to wane. Nonetheless, his influence remained profound. Artists as varied as Bruce Springsteen, K.D. Lang, Jeff Lynne, and Bono of U2 have cited Orbison as a major influence. Springsteen, in particular, once said that Orbison's voice made you want to drive your car off a cliff. However, by the 1970s, Orbison's once glittering career had entered a period of noticeable decline. Decline and 1980s resurgence. The man who had dominated the early 1960s with emotionally charged ballads and soaring vocals found himself sidelined as rock music evolved into new forms. The British invasion, the rise of psychedelic rock, and the popularity of singer-songwriters like James Taylor and Carole King ushered in a shift in musical tastes that left Orbison's style feeling out of step. His commercial appeal began to fade, and after leaving Monument Records in 1965, he signed with MGM Records in an attempt to reinvent himself. However, despite releasing more than a dozen albums for MGM between 1965 and 1973, including The Fastest Guitar Alive and Roy Orbison Sings, none matched the commercial or critical success of his earlier work. Personal tragedies deepened this difficult phase, In 1966, Orbison's wife, Claudette Fradi Orbison, passed away in a motorcycle accident in Gallatin, Tennessee. Just 2 years later, in 1968, a fire destroyed his home in Hendersonville, Tennessee, killing 2 of his 3 sons, Roy, Dwayne, and Anthony. These losses took an emotional toll on Orbison and understandably affected his professional output. Though he continued to tour sporadically, his albums failed to chart meaningfully, and his presence on mainstream radio dwindled. By the mid-1970s, he was largely viewed as a nostalgic figure, respected but no longer relevant in the shifting musical landscape dominated by glam rock, disco, and emerging punk. But the 1980s marked a remarkable, unexpected resurgence for Roy Orbison, catalyzed by a younger generation of rock musicians who had grown up idolizing his work. Artists like Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan frequently praised Orbison in interviews and performances, emphasizing the emotional power and influence of his songs. Springsteen, who had covered In Dreams and referenced Orbison in his lyrics, most notably in Thunder Road, often described Orbison as one of the purest voices in rock. Dylan, who had long admired Orbison, once said that his voice made you cry just to listen to it. Their reverence helped reignite public interest in the man once dubbed the Big O. The decade of revival began to solidify when Orbison earned mainstream recognition once again with a Grammy Award win in 1981. His duet with Emmylou Harris, That Lovin' You Feelin' Again, appeared on the Roadie film soundtrack and won the Grammy for Best Country Performance by a duo or group with vocal. The song's modest chart performance, peaking at number 6 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart, was overshadowed by the symbolic importance of the win. It marked Orbison's re-entry into serious musical conversation. In 1987, his legacy was formally recognized with induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Songwriters Hall of Fame. The Rock Hall ceremony, held on January 21, 1987, at New York City's Waldorf Astoria Hotel, featured Bruce Springsteen delivering a moving speech.
Roy Orbison. Besides Johnny Cash, he was the other man in black. He was the true master of the romantic apocalypse.
Calling Orbison the voice of heartbreak and a man whose songs captured the essence of loneliness. The honor placed Orbison back on the cultural map at a time when his influence was being felt by a new generation of musicians. That same year, he was also inducted into the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame. By 1988, Orbison was not only enjoying a resurgence in prestige, but also in performance. In April of that year, he co-founded a supergroup called the Traveling Wilburys, with an all-star lineup of close friends and musical admirers: George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, and Jeff Lynne. Each member adopted a pseudonym for the project, with Orbison becoming Lefty Wilbury in homage to his musical hero, Lefty Frizzell. Their debut album, Traveling Wilburys Volume 1, released in October 1988, was both a critical and commercial triumph. It reached number 3 on the Billboard 200 and was certified triple platinum in the United States. Critics praised its warm, collaborative spirit and timeless songwriting. Songs like Handle with Care and End of the Line showcased Orbison's voice alongside his legendary peers, reintroducing him to a global audience and validating his relevance in an era ruled by MTV and synthesized pop. Tragically, Orbison would not live to witness the full extent of his renewed popularity. On December 6, 1988, while visiting his mother in Hendersonville, Tennessee, Orbison suffered a fatal heart attack. He was only 52. Just weeks earlier, he had completed work on his first solo album in nearly a decade, Mystery Girl, produced with Jeff Lynne, T-Bone Burnett, and other major collaborators. The album was released posthumously in January 1989 and quickly became one of his most acclaimed works, reaching number 5 on the Billboard 200 and going platinum. The lead single, You Got It, co-written with Lynn and Tom Petty, became a top 10 hit in several countries, including the United States, the UK, and Australia. It marked Orbison's first U.S. top 10 hit in 25 years and became symbolic of his triumphant final act. In the decades that followed, Orbison's legend continued to grow. His influence remained omnipresent across genres, and his vocal style has been studied and emulated by countless singers. In 2014, to commemorate the 25th anniversary of Mystery Girl, a deluxe edition was released featuring rare demos, behind-the-scenes footage, and new recordings. Among the most poignant additions was the track The Way Is Love, built from an old vocal demo recorded by Orbison. His surviving sons, Wesley, Roy Jr., and Alex, joined producer Jeff Lynne and John Carter Cash to complete the song. The track used Orbison's original vocals and was accompanied by new instrumentation and harmonies from his children, making it not just a tribute but a collaborative family legacy. The song's release was accompanied by a short documentary titled Mystery Girl, Unraveled, which chronicled the making of the album and the final phase of Orbison's life. With his final years filled with critical acclaim, chart success, and enduring friendships, Orbison left behind a musical legacy defined by resilience, passion, and a voice that never lost its haunting beauty. But behind it all, Orbison's life was no walk in the park. Personal tragedies. Roy Orbison married Claudette Frady in 1957. The couple met in Odessa, Texas, where Orbison had been studying at North Texas State College before pursuing music full-time. Claudette was not only the love of his life, but also a frequent source of inspiration. Her name even made it into his 1964 hit, Claudette, a rockabilly number that reflected the exuberance of their early years together. The song was recorded by the Everly Brothers before Orbison released his own version, and it symbolized a time of romantic optimism that would soon give way to a period of unimaginable sorrow. Their family life initially flourished. Roy and Claudette had 3 sons: Roy Dwayne Orbison, born in 1958, Anthony King Orbison, born in 1962, and Wesley Orbison, born in 1965. Orbison, who had grown up in a working-class family in Vernon, Texas, cherished domestic life and often spoke of his desire for stability and closeness. Claudette was a constant presence during his early rise to fame, accompanying him on tours and supporting his career through the whirlwind years of the early 1960s. However, fame also brought tension. Orbison's demanding schedule and Claudette's discomfort with his time on the road led to periods of strain in their marriage. The two eventually separated, but reconciled shortly thereafter. The hope was to mend what they had built together, but this was not to be. On June 6, 1966, just weeks after they had decided to give their marriage another chance, Claudette died in a motorcycle accident in Gallatin, Tennessee. She had been riding with Roy when a pickup truck pulled out in front of them. Roy was uninjured, but Claudette suffered fatal injuries and died at the scene. She was only 24 years old. The shock of her death devastated Orbison, who had not only lost his wife, but also the emotional bedrock of his early musical identity. Still reeling from Claudette's death, Orbison attempted to carry on with his music. He immersed himself in work, releasing albums through MGM Records in hopes of reclaiming the success he had found earlier with Monument Records. But personal tragedy would strike again. On September 14, 1968, just 2 years after losing his wife, Roy received news while on tour in England that his Tennessee home had burned to the ground. In the fire, his 2 eldest sons, Roy Dwayne, aged 10, and Anthony King, aged 6, were killed. His youngest son, Wesley, survived the tragedy as he had been staying with his grandparents at the time. This plunged Orbison into a period of intense grief. Friends and fellow musicians noted a visible change in him. While he continued to perform and record, his presence became more somber, and the emotional weight in his music deepened significantly. Songs like Crying, It's Over, and In Dreams, already recognized for their aching vulnerability, took on even greater meaning. Orbison never spoke publicly in great detail about these losses. He was a reserved man by nature, known for his introverted demeanor and tendency to let the music speak for him. He often appeared on stage in black clothing, with a stoic expression hidden behind dark sunglasses. This was part of his trademark image. While the look was initially adopted due to his sensitivity to light and as a way to combat stage fright, it soon came to symbolize the grief that defined so much of his private world. By the late 1960s and early 70s, Orbison had retreated from the spotlight to some extent, releasing music but with waning visibility. His commercial success continued to decline during this period, and the music industry, evolving rapidly with the rise of psychedelic rock and political protest songs, seemed to leave behind the tender, operatic ballads Orbison specialized in. Despite the darkness, Orbison eventually found a measure of peace. His life began a new chapter with the entrance of Barbara Ann Marie Wellhöner-Jacobs, a German-born music executive who would become both his partner in life and a guiding force in his later career. The two met during a trip to the United Kingdom in 1968, a time when Orbison was still reeling from the devastating deaths of his first wife and two sons. Orbison was in his early 30s, emotionally drained and struggling to sustain his music career amid a rapidly changing industry. Barbara was 17 years younger and in her late teens when she met him, yet their connection was immediate and transformative. Their bond grew quickly. They married on March 25, 1969, in Hendersonville, Tennessee, where Orbison had previously lived with Claudette. This marked the beginning of a stabilizing era in Orbison's life. Barbara, who had a strong sense of both business and emotional intelligence, became more than a wife. She was his confidant, collaborator, and caretaker. Her presence helped Roy regain some of the emotional grounding he had lost, and her influence was instrumental in guiding him through the murky waters of a music industry that by the 1970s seemed to have moved on from his signature operatic rock ballads. While Roy had always been quiet and introspective, Barbara became his public-facing partner. Together, they started a new family. Their first son, Roy Kelton Orbison Jr., was born on October 18, 1970. He would go on to follow in his father's footsteps, becoming a musician and producer in his own right. 5 years later, on May 25, 1975, their second son, Alexander Alex Orbison, was born. Alex would later become a key figure in curating his father's archives and preserving his legacy. Unlike the first chapter of Orbison's family life, which had ended in tragedy, his years with Barbara were grounded in a more settled domesticity. The family eventually moved to Malibu, California, where they built a home that became a sanctuary for Orbison. While Orbison's popularity had waned by the mid-1970s, Barbara never wavered in her belief that her husband still had much to offer the world. She played a decisive role in his gradual return to the spotlight during the 1980s, advocating for better management of his catalog, pushing for better promotion of his new work, and helping orchestrate a resurgence that culminated in his late career renaissance. Behind the scenes, Barbara was frequently involved in coordinating schedules, liaising with producers, and ensuring that Roy's health, always a concern given his past heart issues, was not compromised by the demands of his comeback. In addition to managing Roy's career, Barbara also helped him emotionally process the renewed attention. When he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1987, with Bruce Springsteen delivering an emotional speech declaring him the voice of heartbreak, Barbara stood with quiet pride. She had helped guide him through years of neglect and doubt, and now watched as the world finally acknowledged his enduring contribution to music history. That same year, Roy also entered the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Songwriters Hall of Fame in New York, further affirming the timeless quality of his songwriting. Tragically, the couple's renewed chapter was cut short. On December 6, 1988, Roy Orbison died of a heart attack at his mother's home in Hendersonville, Tennessee. He was just 52 years old.
Of rock music has died at the age of 52. He had a heart attack at his home in Nashville, Tennessee, and died in hospital shortly afterwards.
His death came just weeks after the release of Traveling Wilburys Volume 1 and months before the posthumous release of Mystery Girl, an album that would go on to achieve both critical and commercial success. Barbara was left not only as a widow, but also as the guardian of his immense artistic legacy. In the years that followed, she fully dedicated herself to protecting Roy's name, carefully managing his estate, and bringing his music to new audiences. Barbara co-produced King of Hearts in 1992, a posthumous compilation of unreleased and newly orchestrated material, and was behind the remastering and reissuing of several key albums in Orbison's discography. She worked closely with labels like Virgin Records and Sony Legacy to ensure his work was treated with the reverence it deserved. One of her most notable projects came in 2014 with the release of the 25th anniversary edition of Mystery Girl. The deluxe package included demos, unreleased tracks, and a particularly poignant song titled The Way Is Love, completed by Roy's sons Roy Jr. and Alex, using a home recording Roy had made in the late 1980s. Produced by John Carter Cash and Jeff Lynne, the track was emblematic of the very legacy Barbara had spent decades building. A bridge between Roy Orbison and the next generation, bound by music, memory, and love. Barbara continued to manage Roy's legacy until her own passing on December 6, 2011, the exact anniversary of Roy's death 23 years later. She was 60 years old and died of pancreatic cancer in Los Angeles. Her contributions to preserving and promoting her husband's work cannot be overstated. Through reissues, tribute concerts, documentaries, and licensing arrangements, she kept Orbison's name alive in the cultural imagination. Today, the Orbison estate remains a family endeavor. Roy Jr. and Alex have continued their mother's mission, maintaining official archives, curating museum exhibits, overseeing biographical projects, and collaborating on tributes that keep their father's music in the public eye. Alex has been closely involved with Roy's hologram tours and orchestral concert projects, finding innovative ways to present his father's voice in modern formats while preserving its emotional core. In many ways, meeting Barbara Jacobs was the pivotal moment that allowed Roy Orbison to reclaim his life after an unspeakable tragedy. She offered not only healing and stability, but also a forward-looking vision that would sustain his career in ways he may never have achieved alone. Now, let's solve some mysteries. The enigma of Roy Orbison finally solved. Roy Orbison's public image grew around a compelling paradox. Here was a globally recognized superstar, performing sold-out shows, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1987, who nonetheless remained intensely mysterious. Audiences and critics alike were captivated by a man draped in black, his face obscured behind dark glasses, his stage presence unnervingly still, yet possessed of a soaring, emotionally charged voice that seemed to pour from a hidden wound. Despite mainstream fame, Orbison maintained a personal aura of secrecy and sadness evident in countless live performances and interviews. As time passed, observers began to question whether his haunting tone stemmed merely from romantic sensitivity or something far more profound. Ellipses in his lyrics, sudden vocal crescendos, and shifting song structures, heard in classics like Crying, Running Scared, and In Dreams, hinted at deeper emotional undercurrents. Biographers and family members gradually brought to light previously private materials, such as early journals, letters to Claudette and his children, and interviews with those close to him that revealed a life scarred by unresolved psychological trauma dating back to his childhood. Born in Vernon, Texas, in 1936 into a working-class family, Orbison was often ridiculed as shy, pale, bespectacled, and socially excluded. These remarks left him feeling totally anonymous, even at home, by age 10. This was a pain he never fully outgrew. Those early wounds, biographers like Ellis Amburn argue, did not simply vanish. Orbison transformed them into his music, crafting dramatic emotional landscapes and vulnerability-laden ballads that resonated precisely because they sprang from his inner life. Amburn's 1990 biography, Dark Star, The Tragic Story of Roy Orbison, describes how the deeply private Orbison wore one face for the stage, with glasses, sartorial blackness, composed silence, and another for his art, a voice that bled torment and longing. According to Amburn, Orbison often sought out romantic excess to drown unresolved hurt, and compensated with boastful egotism and emotional distancing. Perhaps the most unsettling dimension of the revelation surrounding Orbison was his medical history. As a teenager, he underwent experimental sinus surgeries to correct chronic breathing issues. These procedures, though standardized today, were unconventional at the time, and later analysis suggests they may have altered his vocal anatomy. The result was the operatic 3-octave range that became his trademark voice. Yet, contemporary sources, including conversations with doctors and family members, indicate these surgeries also left him with chronic sinus pain, frequent migraines, and lingering emotional strain. The procedures gifted the world Orbison's otherworldly vocal power, while exacting a lifelong cost in physical and psychological suffering. Moreover, new archival materials, including letters and notebooks held by the Orbison estate and quoted in the authorized Roy Orbison, confirm that Roy was often depressed, reliant on prescription medication, and in private, had serious doubts about continuing in the music business. He described his own emotional state as brittle and fragile. At times, he contemplated giving up performing altogether, but he kept writing, kept singing. Roy Orbison's dark sunglasses also became as iconic as his voice. This mystery has also been unveiled. Contrary to popular belief, the glasses were not initially a deliberate style choice, but rather a matter of circumstance. In 1963, while touring with the Beatles in the UK, Orbison accidentally left his regular prescription glasses on a plane. Forced to wear his dark prescription sunglasses during performances, he soon realized the look gave him a sense of emotional distance and control on stage. As the persona developed, the glasses took on a deeper symbolic meaning, masking vulnerability, shielding him from the spotlight's glare, and becoming a visual metaphor for the guarded pain that permeated his music. They created an aura of mystery that both protected and defined him, transforming Roy Orbison into the embodiment of sorrow cloaked in style. Moreover, despite widespread rumors and persistent public belief, Roy Orbison was not blind. The misconception stemmed from his constant use of dark sunglasses, his still stage presence, and the emotional intensity of his music, which gave him an almost otherworldly aura. In reality, Orbison had poor eyesight due to severe myopia and astigmatism, which required thick corrective lenses. The prescription sunglasses he wore were a practical solution for his vision problems and, over time, became a signature part of his image. The myth of his blindness was never something Orbison actively encouraged, but neither did he make efforts to dispel it, perhaps recognizing that the enigmatic persona it helped create added to his allure as the Caruso of rock, a man whose haunting voice and mysterious appearance became inseparable from his legend. That being said, today, listeners can truly grasp the human cost behind the brilliance of Orbison's haunting legacy. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.